Hi, Paul Johnson here for Film Obsessive. Today I'm with Jessica Perlman. Jessica is director, writer, and editor of the short film Talk. It's about to have its world premiere next month at the 2025 Slamdance Film Festival. Jessica, thank you for taking your time to speak with us today. And can I have you just do a brief synopsis of your film for our audience?
Great, yeah. So the short film that I created is called Talk, and it's about a deaf man who needs help from a translator to get his air conditioning fixed. So yeah, I don't want to give too much away. It is a short film. It's about 2 minutes, and there's a bit of a punch at the end, so I kind of want to keep that a little bit of a mystery.
Fair enough. We'll keep that a little bit of a mystery. But as I watched the film, one of the things I wondered about is if it were drawn from personal experience. Is it?
Definitely. So I grew up with deaf parents. Both of my parents are deaf. I have an uncle who's deaf as well. So I grew up in a very ASL heavy household, and me and my siblings were all hearing. So that put us in a really interesting position in, I guess, adult situations, like, for example, trying to interpret for a repairman. And yeah, you just get a little bit of like you become an adult a lot faster and you kind of learn the world a lot faster. So that was something that really I wanted to share with an audience in a way that like people could relate to and not just say the words, but people could actually feel the moment in a conversation.
Wow, that must have been a heavy weight of responsibility on you as a child to have to do that translation.
Definitely, and it sort of it's a heavy responsibility, but then it also challenges the like parent-child dynamic where it's like, oh, you want to ground me, and I helped you get a refrigerator, like So we grew up in a really specific way that even to this day as an adult, I'm still like breaking down and understanding fully.
Is this the first like work of art that you've wrought from that experience?
You know what? Yeah, yeah, it is. I think I
Yeah.
spent a long time like trying to avoid it because it's like I people are very interested in this fact about me, and so I kind of tried to avoid it. But this was really the first time I really embraced it and took it as like a personal discovery and like dive into like my own identity.
That's really interesting, and I want to ask you about that a little bit. So like, one way to do that would be like with an epic multi-generational saga and like a cast of dozens, etc.
Yeah.
And instead you went like really micro specific, right? I mean, you've said it's a 2-minute film. It takes place over just a few minutes really of conversation. Can I ask you just about the challenges of scripting something that's going to make its point that quickly?
I think probably the biggest challenge is because I decided not to add subtitles to the ASL part for a very intentional, specific reason. And so reading it on the page is a little tough because it's a very like experiential film instead of so writing it as a script, it was tough. I was going back and forth with some of colleagues and they were like, "Oh, I don't know," but then learning that what's on the page isn't necessarily what's going to be experienced as like a film. So that was definitely a learning experience, and knowing that like a script, when in the script phase, can be like really plain and set out, but the magic sort of comes alive, I believe, in the editing and the acting as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to come back to your perspective on ASL more broadly in a second. I also wanted to ask about the casting process for a film like this. There's three actors in the film. Are all of them ASL literate?
Um, our hard of hearing actor Jacob, he identifies as hard of hearing. He was the only person on set that was fluent in ASL. The main actress had taken some classes, so she was pretty warmed up in that. And then, of course, Doug, our repairman, did not know ASL, which is perfect. So, yeah, but our deaf act, I call him deaf, capital D, deaf is like a cultural belonging and instead of necessarily like a physical thing and not being able to hear. So he is hard of hearing, but his parents are deaf. He went to the same deaf university that my parents went to. So it was like a cool little camaraderie on set.
Okay. Can I ask you, like, more broadly, what's your take? Do you see your industry kind of moving in a good direction for its attention to concerns for the deaf and for the hard of hearing? And part of the reason I asked that, I have a lot of experience as a programmer, as a curator, as a reviewer. Um, a lot of the films that I review come to me without subtitles available for them. With yours, that's, like a very deliberate, intentional aesthetic choice. More often than not, though, it's just like an oversight. And for some films, it makes it tough, if not impossible, to review. It can make it tough for getting into festivals. I'm just wondering, like from your perspective, do you see the industry moving in a direction, in the right direction, or treading water here?
Yeah, I think it's definitely moving in the right direction. Like as far as seeing deaf people and people with disabilities in general on screen, is a huge leap forward. I think what can be like better improved is stories about people with disabilities from perspectives of people with disabilities. I would sincerely love to see like a whole person with flaws and having mistakes and failing. And instead, I sense there's a lot of, especially when it comes to deaf people and sign language, because it is a really enthralling language. Like to be able to see it's really cool on film, on screen. But it tends to take this like benevolent position where I really want to show deaf people in this like fully human way.
Yeah, I understand that. So, are there like portrayals or specific films or narratives that you have a little bit in the back of your mind that maybe you want to chafe against a little bit, or maybe you thought were really good as representative works of art when you're crafting talk?
Yeah, certainly Coda was on the top of my mind. Um, I watched that movie with my parents and we had a good time watching it. It was very important, for us to see together as a family. Um, I do want to see more, I guess, like the singing and the deaf component together felt a little, I guess, like Disney-ish in a way, which is appropriate. Like I loved it, but I kind of want to see like the real gritty, the kind of not so bright side of people who are living their lives.
Did you happen to see Sound of Metal?
I did see Sound of Metal. Yeah, yeah. That one, it is interesting. There is certainly a huge delineation between someone who's lost their hearing or someone who has no hearing versus deaf culture and deaf language and history and like even like meeting Jacob, the our deaf actor, it was almost like we had this cultural connection even though we've never met. So he was on the football team that my dad was on the football team of for Gallaudet University and they have this like uh tradition where they shave their heads. So they both did that and that was really cool to be like, oh, this is like my person, like we're part of the same community.
That's really cool. And I might just ask about the production itself. Did you shoot as quickly as the film looks like you shot?
Yeah, we shot in a day. We shot in a day. We shot at my friend's mother-in-law's house. So it was like I like to say that it's really short and I would have loved to do more, but that's like all I could afford to put on screen at the moment. So
Well, in
uh
a way, all films are all what the filmmaker can afford to
yeah,
put on
exactly. That's so true.
screen
That's
at the
very true.
moment, right?
That's very true.
But yeah, do you have bigger things in mind potentially,
Yeah.
or?
Yeah, so I have a feature version of this. story. It's kind of similar to what I was speaking about, having our deaf character have these all these different facets of like making mistakes or trying to become a better version of themselves with their daughter, who's often placed in really like adult situations, having to constantly translate or and so she becomes this hyper independent child. And so the dad that was relying on the hyper independent child, like how do they move through life? So that's the feature version that I'm working on. I also have a short that I'm working on that is inspired by my dad. Well, certainly my dad and my dad's generation. In the early 60s, sign language was seen as bad for deaf kids. And so my dad and my mom and like a whole generation of deaf youth were not given access to language. They were, in a sense, like stripped of their native language, which is sign language. And that certainly didn't work. My dad was born in New York, and he grew up in one of the most interesting cities in the world and had no language to express himself. So that's what the short is about.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. I hope I get a chance to see that in the future. And in the meantime, will you be at Slamdance with
I
Talk
will,
next
I will,
month?
I will.
That's exciting. Will that be your first experience presenting your work at a festival, or did you have your prior short film out? Were you at festivals with that one as well?
I had some other films in festivals that were out of state, so I did not present them. So this will be my first time presenting, and it will be at Slamdance, so that's really exciting.
Okay, that is exciting. Again, thank you so much for visiting with us today, Jessica. The short film is called Talk. It's going to be premiering at Slamdance next month, and we hope to get to see it at other festivals and maybe a bigger, more expanded version on the screens in the future. Thanks again, Jessica.
Thank you so much.